Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. Today, we are blessed and honored to have Zach Wilcox back once again presenting. Zach, you've always been a subject matter expert. Thank you so much for carving out time for us today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks, John. Appreciate you having
Fabulous.
me back.
Oh, the honor is ours. Thanks for coming back. How is 2022 looking for you? That sounds so much better than 2020.
It
How is
does.
2022 looking for you?
As long as it's not 2020, comma, 2, that's
Yeah,
not what we want. Uh,
exactly.
it's looking great. Yeah,
Fingers crossed. I think it's a
that's
lot
right.
of the small business mindset. You put your head down, you go get it.
Yep.
I like it. Well, you've got some good stuff for us, but before we go any further, I do want to take a moment to thank Cashify. Cashify is one of our sponsors. They're an alternative financing firm, and they help small businesses acquire short-term funding, alternative financing needs, bridge loans, that type of thing, especially when they're not bankable. So, big shout out, thank you to Cashify. And without any further ado, Zach, you've got the controls.
Awesome. Well, as you know, this content today is all about hiring and onboarding. We want to make sure that you guys are being able to hire well to keep people long term, right? It shouldn't be as difficult as it is to hire people, to hire the right people, and have them stay for a long time, because it costs a lot of money. We know that, to hire people when they leave, when you have to fire them for whatever reason. So that's what we're doing here. How can we hire people, and how can we orient them so that they will help you be more successful, and so that they will be more successful in your organization? We know again that turnover absolutely kills small businesses, right? This study done by Gallup, that their cost of replacing someone who quits or is fired is 2 times their annual wage. Is insane. You know, if you're thinking, hey, I'm a small business owner, I've got someone who I'm paying $30,000 a year, and it's going to cost you potentially up to 60,000 to replace them. That's insane.
Real
In
quick,
addition,
can I
yeah,
jump in there with a question, Zach?
yeah, absolutely,
Because I
please.
think this is something that a lot of small business owners, they see the number and they think there's no way in heck I'm out of $60,000
Yeah.
cash. Can you walk the audience through real quick how you reach that number and what that looks like?
Yeah, well, this is not my number, it's Gallup's. I'm
Correct.
by the
Yeah.
way. So
Excuse me. Yeah.
yeah, so Gallup has done this study, and it's through a lot of different factors that happen when someone quits or you have to fire them. First of all, it's their productivity lost, right?
Hmm.
And then it's the process of interviewing, of hiring. How many hours do you spend interviewing people and having secondary interviews and checking references? That's time that you're the most valuable person to your business, right? As the owner of a small business,
Hmm.
you're absolutely the most valuable person. How many hours are you then having to sink into interviewing, and that's stopping you from doing whatever is going to be pushing your business forward and providing the most value for your business? So there's money lost, both because you're having to spend your time looking and in lost revenue. And then as you're having to bring them on and hiring them, there's money lost in training, in orientation. Maybe they're not quite as effective. You have to figure out how they fit into the team well. So those 3 things together combine uh, to where Gallup is getting that number from, because it really does cost so much money. As you can see, in addition to the morale, if you're having to fire someone or if they quit, that really does break down team morale. And if it's quitting, almost always it's our best people that are leaving first, and not our
Hmm.
worst people, because our worst people that are the ones like, I don't know if I can get another job somewhere else, I'm going to stay. uh which then, if our best people are leaving, that's also our top performers that are leaving, which means that the people that are staying are our worst performers. So it's all of those things combined to where we get this insane number of, potentially, depending on how much you pay them, potentially $60,000, $70,000 worth of sunk cost.
That's hugely helpful. Thank you for that insight there. 'Cause I think it brings
Yeah.
it very much into perspective. It's not just a number drawn out of a hat.
No.
It's a host of different variables that go in there.
Yeah. And
Time,
it's
hard cash costs,
yeah.
culture costs, so to
Yeah.
speak.
Yeah. It's a scary number too,
It is.
right? Which is why we're doing this today, because it's a scary number. So there's 4 steps, you could say, that we're going to go through today, that if you start them, can start helping you reduce the turnover. And as you're hiring people, make sure that you're getting the right people. So that's what the first half is going to be focused on today, is how are we bringing the right people in? And the first step here is establishing processes and using the right tools. You have to establish processes, because if you don't, it's going to be all willy-nilly, it's going to be all over the place. And tools are out there that can make us and help us hire better than we are right now. The second one is interviewing in a unique and deliberate way. Interviews, I think often people are scared when it comes to interviews because there's horror stories about, being sued for asking this question or being sued for asking that question. There's a lot of really safe ways you can go about interviewing that can put people off guard, so to speak, so you get a more genuine answer, because there's so much interview coaching these days that it's almost difficult to really find out what people think in interviews. The third one is, now we're getting into orientation. The third one is, how do we orient them and train them to retain them long term and not just get them up to speed as quickly as possible, which can have a long term detriment. And the last one is creating that culture that will drive performance by rewarding behaviors that you want to see, so that the people you bring in continue to want to stay. So you can see the first half is about hiring. The second half is about having them stay long term, which is what we want, because that saves you a lot of money as well.
So can I jump in there with just a quick clarification,
Please,
just for the audience listening then?
please.
You are really focusing this on finding the right people. Not everyone who goes through this process is going to be the right fit. And especially
Exactly.
now in a labor market where it's really tight and it's really hard to find people to work,
Exactly.
you still need to be selective on that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Because if you hire the wrong person, uh, and you have to fire them 3 months later, that's even worse than having them quit 3 months later, because if you're firing them, it's for a reason. You're not firing them for no reason. So in that 3 months, there's going to be some kind of a drain on your time, on your culture, on your morale, all of these different kinds of things that are going to be really negative for your organization.
Mhm.
Because not everyone is going to be a great fit everywhere.
Right.
Some person might be a superstar in one organization and terrible in another, and that's what we want to find out, is how we can find the people that are going to be great for us.
Perfect. Thank you for that clarification.
Absolutely. And this is one of my favorite quotes by David Novak, who's the retired CEO and chairman of Yum Brands, which is KFC, Pizza Hut, Taco Bell, a lot of the big fast food chains. You can see he says, numbers may drive the business, but people drive the numbers, which is why the focus on hiring, and you guys know this, right? If you have great people, your numbers are going to go up. If you've got
Yep.
crap people, they're going to go down.
It's true. You got to get the right people, like the whole John Maxwell theory. You got to get the right people on
Yep.
the bus and the wrong people off.
Yep. Exactly right. So we're going to start. So we're going to go over 4 tools here. You'll see at the end, I say there are more tools that are available. These are 4 that I love and that I use, uh, both when I was still hiring and now as a consultant. I ask all of my clients, I say, hey, you should use this. Ask them if they are, um, because it really helps clarify and make sure that we are clarify who we should be getting and make sure we're getting the right people. So the first is called the ideal team player, and it's a really simple model around 3 characteristics: humble, hungry, and smart. The first one, humble, is, are we willing to say, hey, I screwed up? I was wrong. Hey, I need help. Humility, it's not, I don't have to spend that much time defining humility. We kind of know what that is when we see it. The second one, hungry, is about having a strong work ethic, but it's more than that. It's about being excited for challenges, being excited about those difficult times when, hey, this is going to be a challenge. Let's push through. It might be really hard, but let's go get it, because this is going to be awesome once we push through. And the third one, smart, is about being people smart. It's kind of like having emotional intelligence, but it's more than that as well. It's when you enter a room, do you know the effect you're going to have? If you're having a meeting, can you kind of tell how what you're saying is affecting the people around you? And the 3 of those together, if you have all 3 of those characteristics, then you will be an ideal team player that people love working with, they love working alongside, they love working for. And if you kind of look at this model and say, okay, what happens if I take away one? Let's say if we take away humble, right? There's names. So the people who developed this, the table group developed this model. They came up with names for all 3 of these, right? So if you take away hungry, for instance, and you're just humble and smart, you're going to be what they call a lovable slacker, right? You're really people smart and you're really humble, but you just don't have that drive. You're a lovable slacker, which is kind of easy to understand. People love lovable slackers, but they're just not great to work with. I'm sure you've all worked with a lovable slacker before. they're not great to have on your team. The second one, if we take away smart and it's hungry and humble, we call an accidental mess maker, where they can't really read people. They don't really know they're not great at operating in teams. Um, you kind of look behind them and there's broken vases everywhere because they're running into everything on accident. People know they have good intentions. They just don't really know what they're doing. The third one, if you take away humble, is what they call the skillful politician. And this is not, about wonderful politicians like John is, but about people who are politicizing work and how do we kind of backstab people and treat them in ways that aren't kind, right? And this is the worst kind because they've got a lot of drive and they're really smart. They know how to be around people, but they have no humility. And this is really team killers. If you have someone like this on your team, they're absolute team killers because they know how to put on the act. They know how to act in front of people. But then 3 months later, you're going to look around and there's a bunch of dead bodies in closets all around your campus, right? They really absolutely destroy teams. So if you're going to watch out for any three of these, it's got to be the person who's lacking humility.
So I've got a quick question here then, Zach.
Yeah.
If a small business has an interview process, you can include a little bit of a subjective grading system. There's nothing wrong with that in terms of
Yeah.
HR onboarding. Is this something that you could incorporate and say on a level of 1 to 10, how humble are they? On a level of 1 to 10, how are their people skills or people smarts? And level of 1 to 10, how hungry are they?
Yeah, you absolutely could. Because this is not something where being an ideal team player doesn't mean you're a 10 in all three of these. I'm going to make up a number here and let's say that's 7. If you're a 7 in all three of them, that means you're an ideal team player. Excuse me. You might be a 10 in hungry and you might be a 7 in humility and a 9 in people smarts. There's still a grading system there where people will be better than others, and people have a weakest as well. So for me, my weakest one is people smarts. That's the one I know I have to work on the most. And you can really use there's a lot of great questions in the interviewing process you can ask around this where you don't have to specifically come out and say, are you humble? Because who's going to say, no, I'm proud,
Right,
So
exactly.
you can ask questions like, hey, the last time you were out with your friends and you made a mistake, how did you own up to that? Did you tell your friends you owned up? Or if you make a mistake and you're not sure anyone will notice, what do you do? And that can kind of give you an insight. Those questions are hard because again, people get so much interview training, right? That even that kind of question, they can say, oh, I'm definitely going to tell someone. But usually you can pick up in how they say it. And that's an unusual question. People don't often ask that question, I found. So it can kind of put them off guard. And maybe they will ask honestly, go, oh, I'd probably keep it to myself. That's kind of a good idea. You can start to get a gauge of what their humility level is, what their hunger level is, what their people smarts is at.
Awesome. Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, absolutely. So the next tool we're going to use is called the Predictive Index. And this is actually a tool kind of backed with a lot of science behind it. It was developed by the Army early in the century. And the goal of the Predictive Index is you take a quick assessment and so you take one, if you're hiring people, you would take an assessment to create a profile, so to speak, for the job that you're looking for. And it's based around 3 or 4 things. Sorry, it's independence versus collaborative. So this is to measure. This is mine, by the way. This is who I am. So are they independent or are they collaborative? Are they sociable or are they reserved? Are they steady or driving? Are they flexible or precise? And then you create a profile by answering some questions about the job. Do you think the job needs a lot of collaboration? Do you think it needs a lot of steadiness, which is kind of the same work over and over again? And then when you have people come in, you can send them the assessment and it will line them up and it will kind of tell you, will this work kind of fit who they are and how they like to work and how they like to be? Because if you have a job that's going to require someone to have a high level of independence and be able to work on their own and go for it and kind of start themselves, and the person, when they take the assessment, shows that, hey, actually, they've got a lot, they really need a lot of collaboration, it's probably not going to be a great fit. And so that's a pretty easy way for you to say, hey, no, you might be a great fit for this organization, but not for this job. So you maybe can look, is there a job that would fit them? Which, as small businesses, that's usually you're only hiring for one position, usually at a time. So you might maybe keep it in your back pocket and save it for later, or say, I'm sorry, this isn't really going to be a great fit because of we know that you'd kind of be miserable here, So it helps you and it helps them. These kinds of assessments. The third one is super simple. It's some kind of a personality assessment. Really something to kind of get a gauge on who they are, how they're going to act. Are they introverted? Are they extroverted? Extroverts are going to be kind of great in front-facing kind of cashier type roles, service type roles where you're serving the customer all the time and you're more likely to be outgoing and energized by those things. Introverts are going to be, much more happy in a role where maybe you're stocking shelves or working in an office and you don't have to talk as much. So really some kind of a basic personality profile. One of my favorites is the Enneagram. There's dozens and dozens out there that you can pick from. They all have strengths and weaknesses. Really the goal is to continue to get an idea of who they are and if they would fit in this specific job. Because remember, we're trying to, when we go through this process, we're trying to find out, will they be a great fit for this job so they stay a really long time?
So quick question then, for a
Yep.
small business with fewer than 20 employees, which personality assessment, in your opinion, would be a good one to start with?
Probably the two best ones I found are probably the Myers-Briggs and the Enneagram. The Myers-Briggs, the downside there is very it kind of takes a lot of work to really understand it, so that can be kind of detrimental. The Enneagram is a little easier, a little quicker to pick up. That's part of the reason I like it, is I like to be able to apply quickly what I'm reading and what I'm learning and how that helps me understand the people around me and the people that I'm working with.
Hmm.
The Myers-Briggs has a lot of detail to it that's great, but does kind of require more in-depth understanding and reading.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. The fourth one we're going to talk about here is the 6 types of working genius, which similar to the predictive index and whichever personality tool you take, it's an assessment that measures how they work, not really who they are. So the predictive index, and if you choose a personality assessment, is more about who they are, how they operate in the world. The 6 types of working genius is really about who this person that you're interviewing is at work and how they go about their work. So as you can see, there's 6 geniuses, right? And work really flows through all of these geniuses. Every person has 2 geniuses and 2 frustrations. So 2 of these things are things that bring them energy and joy. And that's what the working genius is about. It's not about competency. It's not about skill. It's not about, are you able to do this? It's about the energy and the joy that you get from it. Because remember, we're trying to think long term here. So if you hire someone into a job and they don't get energy from it, and actually with frustrations, it drains their energy really quickly, they're not going to stay for very long because they're going to be sick of the job pretty quickly. So remembering the context and the long-term view that we have, that's the view that we're looking at this from. So it starts with wonder. Wonder is the ability to kind of look around at the world and say, there's something wrong here. I think there's an issue here. Which then flows to invention, which says, oh, that is an issue. Let me come up with an idea to fix it. Which then leads into discernment. Discernment says that idea is not very good. You need to tinker with it. Come back to me again. Or they'll say, that's a great idea. Let's tell the galvanizer. The galvanizer then goes and says, this is awesome. Let me tell everyone about it because this is absolutely the best thing. Which then goes to enablement and says, hey, this is great. I can see that. How can I help? Which then finally goes to tenacity, which says, let's get this done. We need to push it across the finish line. So work, generally speaking, follows these. Sometimes it jumps around a little bit, but probably 90% of the time, work kind of follows this linear path of wonder through tenacity. And understanding the geniuses of the people that you're hiring and on your team is really helpful when structuring jobs and when hiring people. For instance, if you've got a job that you're hiring for, and it's all about, I have to give this person a checklist and they just need to get stuff done. They just need to check things off. You're absolutely going to look for someone who has tenacity as a genius, because if they do, they're going to love that work. They're going to do it really well, and they're going to be really excited to come into work. But if you choose someone who has tenacity as a frustration, they're not going to be excited about it. They're going to do it slower. It's going to drain them of their energy really quickly, and they probably won't stay for that long.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have a question?
I was just going to say this is, I mean, it has such applicability to the small business. I think the
Yeah.
stereotypical example is, it helps you prevent hiring an accountant for a sales role and hiring a
Yeah.
salesman for an accountant.
Yeah.
But there are a number of ways this can be applied. It might help if a small business is growing quickly. Something like this could really help them identify what kind of accountant they need, whether it's a
Exactly.
bookkeeper, a tax filer, or
Yeah.
something more like a fractional CFO.
Yeah.
That's where this type of tool can be really, really helpful.
Yeah. Exactly. Because, I mean, you said it great, right? There are different kinds of accountants. There are different kinds of marketers. Maybe you're wanting to hire a social media person,
Right.
right? So maybe you're at that point in your small business where you think, hey, I've been doing social media up to this point, but I'm not that great at it. I want someone who's going to come in and really be able to take it over. So if you're looking for a social media person who you want to come up with great ideas and really just drive it forward, then maybe you're looking for someone with invention and tenacity who's just going to go do it.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe you're looking for a social media person who you've got lots of good ideas, but you just want to make sure that they are filtering through them to see which ones are worthwhile, and then be really excited to tell everyone about it. Maybe you're looking for discernment and galvanizing, and you don't really need so much of the invention. So there is a lot of really easy applicability really quickly. That's one of the reasons I love this tool, is because you can apply it immediately. You don't really need to learn a whole lot about it. There is some nuance there that you can get into, but you don't have to. You can say, great, here's the assessment. It takes 5 minutes to complete. It's only $20, this assessment. That's part of the reason I love this tool, or it might be 25 actually. So it's super cheap, and it can really help you make sure that you're hiring the right person for the job that you need.
Mm-hmm.
There are, you can see on there as well, there's some elevation of work and there's stages of work. That's more of the nuance. I can touch on it really quick. The elevation of work is more about how, we start at the top with wonder, and then as you slowly work through, it's kind of like landing a plane, right? You start up here and it's really high, and then as you land the plane, it gets lower and lower and lower until the plane is landed. If you're in a tenacity role, and then all of a sudden you try to jump up to wonder, that's really jarring to go from 100 feet to 30,000 feet. But that's when we do, that's our natural state, is to default to our geniuses. So if you have someone with wonder on your team and you're in a tenacity stage, you have to make sure you tell them, we don't need the wonder right now. That's going to be super jarring for us to jump all the way back up.
And I think it's also really good to point out too, the higher ones, wonder, invention, it's very much of like that's your strategy, strategic positioning. And as you work down, tenacity is going to be the boots on the ground, making operations, the front line, making things happen, so to speak. And
Yep.
again, as a small business, you're going to need all of the above, but it's how
Yep.
you align it and where you place it that makes such a big difference.
Yep. Exactly. Exactly right. And if you do have wonder and invention as your geniuses, that's not an excuse to not do enablement or tenacity. Every
Mhm.
job, I like to say every job is a 6-letter job. You have to do all 6 of these, no matter what your job is. You just want to minimize the time that you're spending in your frustrations and outside of your geniuses, because remember, it's all about the energy that we get from working and what really excites us about the work we're doing. Which goes back to, if you're hiring someone who you're hiring them in their frustrations, to work in their frustrations, they're not going to have any kinds of energy or be excited about the work.
Right.
It doesn't mean they won't be able to do it. We're just thinking long term, they're going to be quitting in 3 months, and that's going to be a lot more work and cost you money.
Exactly. And huge time. And time
Yep.
is money. And that's how
Yep.
you reach that calculation again.
Yep. Absolutely. So those are the four tools that I use most often. As you can see, there's a lot more out there. If you don't use these 4, make sure you're finding some kind of a tool to use. There's a lot of tools. Some people will say this is the right tool, this is the wrong tool. They're wrong, right? All tools are great if you use them well. These are
Mhm.
just my 4 preferred ones. Just make sure that you do have some kind of a process and you're using some kind of tools to really filter through the people that you're hiring, because the people we're hiring, the process that we go through really should be like creating a filtration system where you start at the top and absolutely everyone's up here, right? You're not saying no to anyone, but as they kind of go through these processes and these tools you set up, you want to be filtering a lot of the people out that aren't going to be a great fit for you. And so when you get down to the bottom, you're going to have the ideal team members for you and for your team.
It's
And
all
that's what we
about
want.
it's all about finding the right talent, getting them on board successfully,
Yep.
and then making sure that you retain them.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. So the next step we're going to get into is how do we interview in a unique and a deliberate way to make sure that we're kind of seeing potential warning signs and trying to get people a little bit off guard, as I said, so they're answering more honestly. So you can kind of see who they really are instead of who they've been coached to be. And the first step is identify key behaviors. And this actually isn't a part of the interview process. It's something you need to do before the interview process, but is critical to the interview process because you have to identify the key behaviors that drive performance in your organization. And there's actually 4 kinds of behaviors that people often get mixed up, right? So there's permission to play. So if we talk about core values for an organization, people will often say honesty or integrity or things like that, but those are more permission to play. I mentioned this a little bit in the last video I did with you, John. So this is a little bit of review, so I'm going to move through it quickly. But those are like, you have to be honest and you have to have integrity if you want to work in an organization. Then
Exactly.
there's aspirational, which I've worked with a team and they said we want to be hardworking, but that's not a core value. It's not who they are. It's not what it's they wish they were that. And then there's accidental, things like, hey, all of a sudden we look around and we're all in our 30s and we have 5-year-olds. That would be an accidental value, something you don't mean to do, but by accident you're excluding anyone outside of that. So you really want to be careful because that really it limits your diversity, which is terrible for your organization. The fourth one we want to get to is the core values, the core behaviors that are going to drive your business forward, that will help you become the best you can be. So for a small business owner, you really want to look at what are 3, maybe 4 behaviors that you love in your best teammates and that you have that really drive the performance of your team to help you be the best you can be. And once you identify those, you really need to shape interview questions around trying to figure out if the people you're interviewing will have those behaviors. Because if they don't, they're not going to really fit in the team as well. And they're also not going to be driving performance like you want them to drive it. So a great question to ask, we can go back to the hungry, humble, and smart and pretend those are our core values, right? If it's smart, you could ask a question like, hey, when was the last time one of your teammates was really upset and maybe crying, or maybe they were just really upset, and how did you respond to that? And that can kind of give you a clue. Do they have the emotional intelligence required to kind of deal with that kind of a maybe awkward, maybe they're not really sure how to handle that situation with a really emotional team member? Or if it's hungry, maybe you could say, hey, when was the last time you were faced with a really difficult challenge? And how did you handle that challenge? To try to get to understand how are they when things are difficult? I already said a few about being humble, so I won't touch on those, but trying to think about really unique questions to ask that aren't, you do a Google search for the 50 most questions. So is the person you're interviewing. They're Googling those questions as
Exactly.
well. So you really want to think of questions you can ask that they won't really have an answer to, and that are unique to you and what you're looking for in your team. If you run a bookstore, you might ask a question like, how many books do you read? Because if they say, I don't read any books, well, why do you want to hire them? You want people working in your bookstore who love books and who are passionate about books. So if someone walks in, they're like, hey, I'm looking for a fiction book. Oh man, I've got a list. These are my favorite fiction authors. Over here is this one. Over here is this one. You can tell if people love reading or if they don't. If maybe you have a pet store, right? If someone comes in and say, hey, I'm really nervous about, which vaccinations, which medicines I should give to my new kitten, right? You want someone who cares, like, oh man, I've went through that myself. It's such a hard decision because you don't really know. You want You want to make sure that you're keeping your pet safe. So this is what I would do. Here's a great vet you can go to. You want someone with that passion. So even thinking about the business that you're in and asking questions about that can really be a great idea to uncover if this person's going to be a great fit for who you are. Do something unexpected is the next tip I have. This is a great way, again, to kind of get them outside their comfort zone and try to get a more authentic reaction from them. Southwest, who, if you watched the last video I did, I love Southwest, but they have a process when they're interviewing pilots. I know they used to do this. I'm not sure if they do anymore, but I know they used to do this, where if they were interviewing pilots, the pilots would come dressed up in a suit and a tie, and they would take the pilots down to the local store and get them to change into khaki shorts. So they still got their dress jacket and their shirt and their tie and their dress shoes and socks on, but they're wearing khaki shorts. And a lot of the pilots would opt out immediately. No, I don't want to do that. Now, the reason they did that is because one of Southwest's core behaviors is fun-loving. You have to be fun-loving, which means kind of making fun of yourself a little bit and not taking yourself too seriously and being able to have a good time. So that was something that Southwest decided, this is a great way for us to see if these people coming into interview are going to exhibit that trait. Are they going to be fun-loving? And if they opt out and said no, that's a really good sign to them that they take themselves too seriously. And so it's great for Southwest they opted out, because Southwest isn't hiring people they don't want. And it's great for the pilots, because those pilots would be kind of miserable if they were hired, because the expectation would be they be fun-loving. And if they don't want to be, that's going to be miserable for them and miserable for Southwest. So think about something that you can do that's unexpected. Maybe it would be, you kind of have them, if going back to the bookstore example, hey, can you act out your favorite scene from your favorite book? Or if you work in a pet store, you can ask him, hey, would you mind drawing a picture of your favorite animal for me? Now, those might seem silly and unnecessary. The point isn't to pick something that's unnecessary or that will be awkward. It's to pick something deliberate, right? Because we want to be interviewing in a deliberate way to really try to find out what it is that they have or don't have that will be an asset to your organization.
Because if I can jump in again really quickly too, I think it's a cultural thing here
Yeah.
to look at job interviews almost like a pass fail.
Yeah.
That's not the way to look. Is this the right fit? That's the
Yeah.
question that you're really trying to drive. Yes, there are going to be some basic, hey, you need to have these basic core competencies. What you're talking about goes beyond that. You're talking
Yep.
about the cultural fit. You're saying, hey, is this a good fit for the individual applying, and is this a good fit for the company hiring?
Yep.
Because that's where so many errors take place.
Yep. Because if you hire the wrong person, that can actually be worse than hiring a person, than not hiring a person at all. Because if you hire the wrong person, not only is that going to cost you the time and money that it takes to hire them and to train them, but then the ongoing training, support, then all of a sudden you have to start writing them up and you have to go through this firing process. That is so much more time intensive, money intensive, morale draining than if you'd never hired someone at all. And especially in small businesses, if you have a team of 6 people and you're down one person, that's like 20% of your workforce. It's a bit under, 17, whatever that is, of your workforce is suddenly missing. It can seem really draining. Like, I need a warm body. Just get me someone. When in reality, that warm body, that person is going to do more harm if they aren't a great fit than they would if you had just stayed one person down.
Great point.
The third one is asking deliberate questions. This really ties into the previous two, right? They're all linked in a very deliberate way, but you want to ask questions to get specific answers. You don't want to ask questions, like if you're asking a question and you don't know why you're asking that question, you don't know what information you're trying to get by asking that question, you shouldn't be asking it. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of your energy. So every question that you ask, if you have an interview process, if you have a list of questions, go through those questions and say, why am I asking this question? What information am I trying to get? And if you're not really sure, or if you say, oh, that I don't actually need that information, then just nix that question, get rid of it.
Hmm.
Because you want to be optimizing your interview process so that it's using the least amount of your time for the most results possible. And now I'm not saying your interviews should be short. They might be an hour long, but you want to make sure that that's an hour that is absolutely packed with getting a lot of valuable information about that person. I would rather have a 5-minute interview in which I learn a ton about them than a 30-minute interview that I don't really learn anything.
Hmm.
You'd think that's not possible, but excuse me again. If you're not asking the right questions and if you don't know what kind of information you're getting, or trying to get, then that 30-minute interview may as well be a waste of time. Because when you stop and you review after the interview, you review your notes. This is how they answered this question. Okay, well, what does that tell me about who they are and how they're going to be at work and what value they're going to bring? That's why you want to be really deliberate in the questions that you're asking.
So true.
The fourth one is have as many interviews as is necessary. There are a lot of people, again, in small businesses. I understand the crunch of, hey, we need someone. Please just get us someone. After one interview, it seems like they're great. Let's just bring him in. That may be the case. After one interview, you may have no qualms about it at all. But I would suggest that after that first interview, when you go over your notes and you kind of look, and I'll go back to using hungry, humble, and smart as an example. If you say, hey, I know they definitely have humility and they definitely have people smarts, I'm not really sure about, do they have this hunger that I need them to have to be a great member of my team? Have a second interview and really focus, try to design a lot of questions or do something that's specifically around that hunger piece. And how can I get at this information? Don't have more interviews for the sake of having more interviews. That's
Hmm.
a waste of time. If you need to have more interviews to get more information about something specific, when you have that second interview, tailor it specifically. Again, we're trying to be deliberate here, right? Again, thinking long term, we want them to stay a long time. Be really deliberate in how you're asking these questions so that you're getting information about hunger. Do they have the hunger they need to be a successful piece of this organization?
So let me ask a question here then for the small business owner out there. The more interviews you have for, one candidate, is it fair to assume or state that the more complex or the higher level the position, the more interviews you're going to need?
Generally speaking, yes. Yeah. And that's not always the case, but usually it will be because the higher level the position, the more that's going to be required of them. And so the more you're going to want to know about them. If I'm hiring, for a CFO or a COO or a CTO or any of the C suites, right? Or even just a manager, right? If
Mhm.
you're just hiring a manager for your bookstore, you need to know more about them and they need to have more qualifications than someone running the cash register. That's just true. That doesn't mean that you don't care about hungry, humble, and smart. It just means for that person who's running the cash register, maybe that's all you care about is hungry, humble, and smart. And you don't really care about what kind of skills they have, what kind of qualifications they have, where they've worked before, did their team get along with them. Like some of these other things may be less important.
Mhm.
Um, and so while the level of the position may not equate to more interviews, it usually does because you need more information from them and you'll probably want more people to be having interviews with them. That may not always work with small businesses, but if you've got someone you really trust, or if you're in a partnership, having someone else interview can really help get a different perspective on that person. If you have a supervisor, maybe that you think is a great supervisor, and you're trying to hire a second supervisor, even though those people will be peers, still having them help with that interview process, even if they might just be sitting in the background and taking notes, can be a really helpful thing to kind of catch things that you've missed.
And also generating buy-in from everyone because, yes, it
Yeah.
might be most small businesses have a structure where there's one authority head on almost every topic. It doesn't change the authority structure, but it helps create buy-in.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. So, um, again, I want to remind you guys of what why we're doing this, right? Why I'm talking about hiring and why it's so important. Uh, the U.S. Department of Labor says, so from at least 30% here. So this is the US Department of Labor saying they could be 30% of their annual income. So if they have a $30,000 job, we're looking at $10,000. That's still a lot of money, you know? So if we're looking from 10,000 all the way up to 60, which is what Gallup estimates it could be depending on the job. The US Department of Labor says as high as 240 grand. Now we're probably looking at like a CEO of kind of a big business for that kind of money. But the point is, I'm trying to emphasize over and over again that it's not just about time. The time cost is big, but so is the dollar cost. And for people running small businesses, we don't have a lot of money to spend frivolously or to waste on wrong hires, which is why this is so important, right? And why I'm here to kind of help you guys today. So you've gone through that process and you've picked someone, you've hired them, they're going to be a great fit. What next? And this really starts to get into the next portion of how we retain people long term, right? So the hiring aspect is one piece, but then the onboarding and the training is another piece that's really just as important, because if they aren't onboarded well with looking to retain them long term, they're not going to stay long term. You know, so really it's always up to you as the leader, as the person doing most of the training, most of the onboarding. Like all of this is going to rest on you. It takes time, it takes effort, but it's absolutely worth it. As humans, we remember in peaks and valleys. You know, our brain doesn't really have the capacity to remember everything. So if you think back on the last year, what you're going to remember is mostly the highs and mostly the lows. You don't remember. That's why we don't remember what we had for breakfast 3 weeks ago, because that's just like it's just kind of a there thing. But you do remember the day you proposed. You do remember the day you opened your business. You remember the day your kid was born. Those kinds of peaks and valleys are what we remember, because those are the things that our brain keeps. And starting a new job is a peak or a valley, right? And we want to make it a peak, and we want to make sure it isn't a valley. So how can we do that? There's 3 problems that I think we can address when we're trying to onboard well, right? The first is anonymity. So imagine a scenario, right, where someone comes to work, it's their first day, they show up, they're really excited, no one greets them, someone says, oh, hey, your desk is over there. They go, they sit down, it's just a desk, there's nothing. They're kind of waiting around because they can't even get on their computer. They don't have a login information. No one stops by to say hi. Like that kind of a situation is definitely going to be a valley. They're excited. They come. They're really excited to start this new job. Everyone wants to start a new job and they're excited to be there. And then all of a sudden it's, oh man, this sucks, right? They feel anonymous.
Yep.
But people want to be known. All of us want to be known, especially your employees. They want to be known by you. Imagine instead if they show up and there's a big banner that says, welcome, John. We're so glad to have you here. And there's someone waiting and they've got a basket of goodies and they take you to your desk and they're talking to you and they're like, hey, I'm going to hang out with you for an hour because IT's running late and they're not going to be able to get here to set you up with your computer. So we're going to hang out. Tell me about who you are. Like, you know, what do you like? What's your favorite kind of music? What do you do on your days off? That is going to make your new employee feel really well known. And you think, well, that's a waste of an hour of my time. You just were talking about how valuable my time is. No, because remember, we're thinking long term. We want to retain these people long term. That 1 hour will engender so much loyalty and respect and engagement from that employee. It's absolutely worth it. Now, you don't have to have a big banner. You don't have to. You want to do something that is meaningful to you, but whatever it is, make sure that when they come in that first day, that they don't feel anonymous, that they feel like they are a part of the team, that you care about who they are. The second one is irrelevance. This means in regards to their job, they have to know how their job is relevant. If they don't know who their job impacts or what the difference is that their job makes, it's going to be really discouraging and they're not going to want to stay long term. So kind of going back to that same thing, maybe in that hour you're talking with them, you start talking about their job a little bit. Hey, I wanted to tell you a little bit more about your job. You know, maybe you've just hired a personal assistant for the first time because you're at that 20 employee mark, you know, maybe around 2, 3, 4 million a year. and you really need someone to come in and take a big load off your plate because you can't answer emails, you can't manage your calendar appointments, all of these kinds of things. So you say, hey, you're my personal assistant, and I just want you to know that I'm so glad that I've hired you because you are taking such a load off my back. I've been so stressed with, I can't keep my calendar under control. I have people walking into my office all day. I have no idea which emails I should respond to. So I'm so glad that you're here because these are all of the things that you're going to do to help me. That may be the only impact they have is on you, and that's okay. They just need to know who they're impacting and why their job is important.
It needs to be more than just a paycheck. It needs to have a purpose, and
Absolutely.
connecting those dots is
Yep.
something that's often left out, and it can
Yep.
keep everything you're speaking to.
Yep. Absolutely. The third one is immeasurement, and this is a made-up word, but they have to know how to measure their job performance. If they go home at the end of the day and they don't know if they've done a good job, that's really demoralizing. You know, I've had a lot of times in my life where I've gone home to my wife and she said, "How was work?" And I was like, "I don't know. I think I did okay, but I don't really know." And it's because I didn't know how to tell if I'd done a good job or not. My boss had not given me the measurement tools that I needed to make sure I was doing a great job. We'll go back to the same example I've been using, right? You've just hired a PA. You can say, so these are the reasons that I've hired you. This is why I'm really excited. You just finished talking about what makes their job relevant and how you're gonna impact them. And then you can say, so just so you know, for you to be successful, like no one comes in my door unless you've given them the okay. So if you want to be successful, keep people out of my office. Really make sure that you're highlighting to me which emails I need to be checking, you
Mhm.
know, because I don't have to worry about that, and really being clear with me when we meet for our 5 minutes in the morning, what my calendar looks like, how my day's going, give me a really quick brief on what's going on. If you do those three things, now there's more to a PA's job than just that. I'm just, for brevity's sake, I'm keeping it down. But you say if you do those three things, you're doing a great job, and I'm going to tell you that often.
Mhm.
If you start off their first day like that, oh my goodness, are they going to be so much more excited about their job than they were even when they walked in, and they were already excited when they walked in.
For sure.
Yeah. So go ahead, John.
I was just gonna add one here because I think that this really speaks to me because I see this all the time. Almost every small business owner immediately jumps to sales as being the key measurement.
Yep.
Yes, sales is huge. Don't get me wrong, but I would love your input here as kind of the SME here. Um, when you're talking measurements, you probably want to include measurements that typically lead to sales in that type of setting. Yes, obviously we need to get sales. That's every small business owner gets that. But you want to make sure you're focusing on the activities that generate those opportunities. So it's
Yep.
more than just sales. Yes, we all have sales. You need to include that, but you also want to include the part that leads to that opportunity.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And really, I would be hesitant to, uh, for anyone who's not a salesperson, I would be hesitant to make sales one of the measurement tools for them if they've done their job well. Um, excuse me. So this, when I talk about measurement or immeasurement, that's not a formal kind of a thing. It's really for them personally to know if they've done a great job. So if you run a restaurant, maybe, how do you tell your servers if they're doing a great job? Well, maybe you say, how many laughs did you get at your table today? Or how many smiles did you get? Or how big were your tips? Uh, because tips are a lag measure to the service. People aren't going to give big tips if you haven't had great service.
Hmm.
And if people are going to laugh, that usually means you're giving good service. And so they're probably going to leave a bigger tip. So there are things like that that you can take. Uh, but if you told a waiter or a server, sorry, hey, to be good, you need to have 15 tables. Well, they can't really control how many tables they have. A server is really restricted by how many people come in the door, how busy they are, how many other servers there are in a restaurant. So that you really have to kind of tailor the ways that you're measuring to the job specifically. And you might say, well, what if this server lies and says, hey, I got 20 smiles or 20 laughs and really they only got 5? well, that's on them, right?
Right.
That's up to, because again, this is not a formal tool that you're going to give bonuses on or anything like that, or promoting them. This is just a way for them to know how they're doing at work every day. And also, I'll add, this is a little off topic, but this should not be the only way. If they're doing a great job, you have to tell them as the leader.
Hmm.
You absolutely must tell them often, hey, you're doing a really good job. I really appreciate you. And on the flip side, if they knew it improved, make sure you tell them consistently. Don't wait for an annual review. That's 9 months too late. They need to know how they can improve 9 months ago when they were having the problem.
So true. So
So
true.
um, so if they're going to cheat, so to speak, on these measurement goals, that that's totally up to them, because it really is about how they're feeling when they're going home at the end of the day, which is the goal here. We want them to go home excited about the work. We want them to go excited. Hey, I had a really good job at work today because I had 20 of my tables laughing and smiling at my jokes. That was really good. I feel really good about the way that I served my tables today. If they lie on their little sheet and say they got 20, they go 5, when they go home and their wife asks them, they're not going to say they got 20. Like that's not gonna help them when they get home. So
Right. Exactly.
yeah,
And I think so, to kind of summarize that, when an employee goes home, you want them to feel like they're part of something. You want them to feel like they're working for a common purpose, something bigger than themselves. And you want to be able to substantiate and say, hey, here's how you know you actually did a good job. You got 20 laps or whatever the metric
yep,
is.
yep. And they want to be cared about for who they are more than just who they are at work. They want you to care about the fact that their grandma is sick, or the fact they love playing soccer. That stuff
Right.
seems really soft, and it is in some ways. It is soft, but we aren't separate people at home and separate people at work. We go to work with all of who we are. We go to work with the sick grandma and with the dying dog and with a love for football or baseball or music. And if we are only seen at work as someone who runs the cash register or stocks the shelves or does the finances, that will be demoralizing really quickly, because that's not who we are. So all
Hmm.
three of those things together. So if we can manage, and again, it's not easy, it takes some time and it takes some extra effort, but your employees are going to be more engaged, they're going to be more informed, they're going to be more passionate, they're going to make you more money, right? Which is why I don't say all this stuff just to have so you can have happy employees. Your happy employees will make you more money. If you remember back to the quote I said earlier by David Novak, your numbers may drive your business, but your people will drive your numbers. So if you
Hmm.
take care of your people, you're going to make more money. It's just going to happen. So I'm going to move quickly. I know we're running out of time here, so I'm going to move kind of quickly through these last things. But the last step is really kind of an encapsulation of what I've already said. And it's really about creating a great culture. Because if you don't have a great culture and a deliberate culture that you want to drive performance, people aren't going to stay long term. So we've already talked about this, finding out which behaviors are most important to you that are going to drive performance, right? Again, it's about, we don't do these things to say, hey, I'm a great boss, look at me. We do these things. That's important, but we're a business and we have to make money. Make sure that whatever you pick is going to drive performance, right? Whatever those key behaviors you decide on for your business, I'm going to go back to hungry, humble, and smart because that's the example we've used. Whatever 3 you use, if being humble isn't going to drive performance on your team, is it worth having there as a key behavior that you want? Because you want to instill behaviors in your team that are then going to drive performance. And if the behavior that you're trying to instill isn't really driving performance, does it need to be there? The third is promote, reward, and hire based on those behaviors. If you've got an employee, and almost every business that I see has a situation like this where they've got an amazing top performer that doesn't at all exhibit any of their key behaviors, and you promote them, that's going to absolutely kill the morale in your team. It's going to kill your culture, and it's going to absolutely drop performance in everyone else. It can be really, 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 really difficult, especially in a small business, to fire or part ways. I like to say make them available to the marketplace. A top performer on your team that doesn't exhibit the aspects of your culture that you want, but for the long-term benefit, you have to do it, because everyone else on your team is going to suffer if you don't.
So true. It's so true.
The last step is to consistently remind your team of these behaviors. If you have a weekly meeting, talk about them in your weekly meeting. Say, hey, Jill, this week I saw you exhibit this behavior. Really well done. Thank you so much for that. That will be extremely encouraging for that employee. And it's also going to reinforce, and everyone wants to be praised. Everyone wants to say, you did a good job. And if you see them praising Jill for that, or whoever, they're all going to want to start doing that thing so that they get called out next time. And so that's the great thing about it, is if you reward based on these behaviors, remember, these behaviors are going to drive performance, right? It's not just airy fairy stuff, but it's going to drive performance. If you reward and congratulate and thank people for these behaviors on a consistent basis, your team members will automatically start exhibiting those. They'll change the way they behave because they know they're going to get rewarded if they do. You could do something like, hey, at the end of every month, I'm giving away a $100 Amazon gift card to the person who displays this behavior the most, right?
Mm-hmm.
You think they're going to compete for that? Absolutely, they will. They're going to try their hardest to make sure that over the course of that month, they're going to be the one getting that at the end of the month. And you might think in some ways, well, isn't that like asking them to be something they're not? In some ways, maybe, but people become who they act like.
Yes.
So if they're consistently exhibiting this behavior, if people are put in situations in which they're consistently patient, and they have to be, they will transition from an impatient person to a patient one. That's just how our brains are wired, is these behaviors that we consistently do eventually become who we are. So that's all. I'm really grateful for your time. I know that all small business owners, you guys are all incredibly busy. You've got a lot on your plates. I really tried to give as much value as I could here. As you can see, I'm absolutely happy to give free hour-long sessions. If you want to call me. I'd love to dive into anything more here. There's absolutely no need for, like, I'm not expecting anything. I just want to help, right? I love small business. You guys are changing the world. Don't be afraid to give me a call or an email. I want to help.
Zach, I cannot thank you enough for taking time out of your day to share your expertise with us and for your kind offer there. That's definitely something that can have a huge impact on small businesses, because this is one of those areas. It's not fun to deal with for most
No.
people. It takes time, it takes effort. There's a lot of disappointment. You think you found the right candidate and something
Yeah.
happens and it doesn't pan out.
Yeah.
There's a lot of difficulty that's involved, but having a trusted subject matter expert is huge. So thank you for your time. Thank you for that offer. I think it's something that
Absolutely.
can benefit a lot of small businesses.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me, John. I appreciate it.
The honor is ours. You stay safe, stay blessed, and I look forward to next time.
Likewise.